Hi, I'm Candace Smith. I'm the product marketing manager here at RBR. And today I'm going to talk to you about Ruskin, which is our all-in-one software. So by all-in-one, I mean you can use it for any of the products that you have from RBR. So old stuff, new stuff, very complicated things with many sensors, or very simple things that just has one sensor on it, for example. Today I'm actually running Ruskin on a Mac. You can run it on a Mac, a PC. We also have a mobile app, which I'm not going to go into today, but that also operates on iPhones and Androids. Feel free to download Ruskin and follow along if you haven't already. Keith is going to pop into the chat a link to go download Ruskin if you wanted to do that and follow along. And you might be thinking, like, I don't have a license key or I don't have a dongle. You don't need those things for Ruskin. Anybody can download it at any time, and you can use it for many different things, as we're going to talk about today. So I'm also going to be looking over here. I have a cheat sheet here, so I don't want to forget to touch on everything. So today, I'm not going to actually touch on every little feature and function in Ruskin. I'm just going to give some of the hot tips that you can use it, from having no instrument all the way up to actually having data. So I'm going to highlight just some of the cool things that I like. Feel free to post in the Q&A so we can track that. My colleague Keith is online to help out. And I do have like I said, I do actually have a list of things to touch on, but if y'all have questions or we want to direct things in a particular direction, I'm super happy to answer that. So also with the webinar today, I'm going to focus on CTD instruments. So that's connectivity, temperature, depth. So I'm going to be showing you a CTD. I'm going to be configuring CTDs. So that's something that measures salinity, temperature, depth, if you're not aware of it. And speaking of that, I'm going to start with a CTD poll. So the poll is going to be, how, if you are using CTDs right now, RBR or not, or you want to use CTDs in the future, how are you using them? And that'll actually help me a little bit, again, with determining how I'm going to go with the webinar. Are you doing it in profiling mode mostly, which seems like most of you are, or moored, or on a platform like a float or underwater vehicle, or are you using it in a completely different way? And I would love to hear about that, because that would be great. So if you could pop that in the chat if you are using CTDs in any other way. So we'll keep that poll rolling. Oh, and I'm going to set, actually, I'm going to post the link into the chat for everybody. Sorry, everyone. Message. Sorry, just 1 second. I'm just trying to copy this so you can download it. Copy. There we go. Okay, cool. So it seems like most folks are using it for profiling, and there's a few more, and there's a few platform questions. So that's great. I'm going to end that poll there. Sure, I can share the results so everyone can see. All right, let's get that out of the way. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and you'll just see me, and then we'll bring up Ruskin. Great. Okay, so okay, I want to make sure I did everything there. Okay, so this is Ruskin. This is nothing fancy. I just launched it from the word go, so I haven't done anything fancy. And I'm running this from like the customer facing version of it. So there's nothing in here that you won't be able to do or you won't be able to see, because we do have special versions for like developer mode for our engineering team. Okay, so if you've never used Ruskin before, if you've never heard about RBR before, you might wonder why it's even useful. And you can actually do a lot of pre-planning with Ruskin. So there's a lot of functionality, even if you don't have an instrument. So today's webinar, I'm going to focus on kind of 4 different pieces very quickly in each piece. How you can use Ruskin when you don't have an instrument to do this planning. I'll show you an actual instrument and see what it looks like when you plug it in. What it looks like after you've recovered an instrument. So I'll use the same instrument and pretend that we just recovered it, and then actually show you some data from it. So here we go. So the first thing probably that's going to be useful to anyone, is simulating an instrument in Ruskin. So again, you just open it up and then you go up to the file structure at the top, and instruments, simulate an instrument. And as I said, I'm not going to go through every little detail, but if you click on the second tab over, which is standard instruments, I'm going to configure a CTD. So actually, I'm going to configure a profiling CTD. So conductivity, temperature, pressure are all here already. And down here to the left, we have this options, and we have many different options. And I'm going to make a concerto CTD with fast 8. And this means it has up to 8 hertz continuous sampling. So 8 times a second you can sample, which is really useful for profiling or doing a cast. And then I come down here and I hit the OK button. And then Ruskin is doing its thing right now. It's kind of building this instrument and giving me lots of numbers, and you can see everything popping up here. So again, I'm going to touch on just a few of these things. So first of all, we have over here, you can see that the mode is in continuous, and it actually defaulted to the rate that I picked. So I picked the fast 8. So it's showing me at 8 hertz continuous sampling. The batteries inside the CTD will last around 74 days. So that's continuous sampling every single second, every single minute of every day at 8 hertz. So this is taking 8 data points a second continuously. The batteries will last 74 days. You can also see here that the battery type is called a LTC, a lithium thionyl chloride battery. So that's what we ship with if it's a CTD. And you can actually change the battery chemistry here. And this tells you which chemistries will actually work for the instrument that you simulated. So you could, in some cases, for example, these batteries are hard to find. So people might want to stick with alkaline batteries. So if you put an alkaline battery here, you might see that this is a different time. Now it's 22 days instead of 74, which was before. Amy has her hand up. So can you unmute yourself, Amy? Or maybe I have to do that. Oh, I don't see your hand up anymore. Okay. I'm going to go back to screen share. Okay. So yeah, this actually tells you which chemistries you can use for the instrument that you simulate. So this is again, before you even have an instrument and nothing's connected right now. This will really help you in your planning of how long a deployment will last with a particular instrument. Okay, so let's simulate another instrument. Maybe you're not just interested in CTD. So let's do a CTD with a new sensor that we have, which is a Tridente. It's a 3-in-1 sensor. So it's measuring, in this case, backscatter, chlorophyll, and FDOM. And then we'll also add an oxygen sensor in here. And for fun, I'm still going to add the fast 8 sampling. And you can simulate as many instruments as you want. So it's also good. You can flick between the different simulated instruments to get different battery lives. So here you can see that same thing, 8 hertz continuous sampling, and that now it's about 2 or just under 3 days of battery life. So adding these optical sensors really affects the battery life. And you can see that the battery chemistry is now changed. It's a much shorter list than what we had before with just the CTD. So here we ship with lithium iron batteries. Oh, also, sorry, I should have pointed out down here, you can see which parameters that you'll get from a CTD. So here on this side, we have the parameters we actually measure, and then we have derived parameters like salinity here, and you can see all the different units. And then this other CTD that I configured with the triplet and a oxygen sensor, you can see all the different units as well and how many different variables you get from that configuration. So here, maybe this is for mooring this time. So here we're going to click and we can show that instead of doing it in continuous mode, maybe we'll want to do it in bursts. So assume we have this instrument on a mooring line and we want to do some burst sampling. So maybe we want to sample every second, and then we want to do that for a whole minute. So sample once a second for 60 times, which is a minute. And then maybe you want to do that every 5 minutes. And then you can see now the battery life is changing here. So that's like 2 weeks. Maybe you want a month-long deployment. You might need to do, say, like 11 minutes. So the logger will turn on, sample at 1 hertz for 1 minute, and then it'll be off for 10 minutes, and then it repeats that cycle over and over and over. Oh, and also just one thing I wanted to point out here, you can see the clock, which I'm going to show you later. You can actually put it in local time, which is the computer time, or UTC time. You can pick whichever one. You can see that the time is changing here as well. So that's different ways to simulate different instruments in Ruskin, and there's lots of other things we can talk about, but I'm going to stop talking about that for now. I'm going to check the Q&A to see if there are any questions about instrument simulation. And I don't see anything, so that's cool. I'm just going to reshare my screen again. Okay. So, oh, and also one fun fact about Ruskin is that our team actually uses this internally. So when the production team is building CTDs, they actually go through and use Ruskin to put in all the different parameters and everything that's needed. So it's a tool that's not just used by all of our customers, but we all use it as well. I use Ruskin every day to do different simulations and checking on different things. So it's a super useful tool. Okay, so now I have a CTD. So this is a conductivity cell. This is our thermistor here, and then we have a pressure sensor here. So this is basically what I simulated the first time around here. This concerto is what I have. To get inside, to get it connected to Ruskin, I can use Wi-Fi, but today I'm going to use a cable. So this cable comes with the instrument. So I'm going to plug it in. There's a couple of ports there. Pop that in there. We are. And I'm not touching anything. It just realized, like, when Ruskin is open and you plug in an instrument, it knows that it's there. So it's gonna automatically detect that it's there. Okay. So here you can see that actually there's a lot more things that look a little bit more active. So up here again in the simulated version, you can see that some things are blacked or like grayed out and you can't see anything. So down here with the real one, I can't change anything because it's configured as it's ready to be used. So it's configured with twist activation ready. So you would just twist it and it would start. So I can't change anything here. So I'm going to stop. And now you can see I can change all of these different fields here. Oh, there's a question. Time lag. That's a great question. I'm going to talk slightly about the time lag. Oh, sorry. Dan's asking, most equipment have a time lag over some period. Are you able to update time on the fly via retrieved GPS data? So you cannot add a GPS like stream into the logger, but there is one slight thing that we can do, which I can show you. So if yeah. So, oh, I was going to show you the next part, but I can show you here. But actually, if you hover over the here under the clock, you can see that the logger time has lagged the computer time by about 6.5 seconds. So our loggers, the clock drift is up to 60 seconds a year. So you can see that my instrument, I haven't connected it in a while, and it's lagged about 6.5 seconds. So you can get that information. And clock lag isn't always linear, but it gives you some idea from the time that you deployed it to when you retrieve it, that you can do some corrections for that difference. If you did want to use a GPS feed, I would recommend just having like the, oh, actually you can use the GPS. You can use not the GPS time, but a GPS data point. If you use the mobile app out on the water, you can get the GPS from the phone in the mobile app. So you can do that. But the time synchronization, it's a little bit harder. We don't pull in any feeds into the logger currently. Okay. I hope that answers your question, Dan. So, oh yeah, another thing. Yeah, so actually, I'm going to just like change the sampling here. You can see I can do that with these different options in here. I showed you the time lag. And one really cool feature is if I did set all this up. So again, I can change things. I like to have this in twist activation, for example. It actually knows that there's alkaline batteries inside and everything. And I'm going to maybe set the clock to local time right now, and then I'll enable it. There's nothing on my logger, so I didn't have to worry about it. And now it's all ready to be used again now. Also, under instruments, you may or may not have noticed that there's this button called update instrument firmware. So you can update the instrument firmware remotely. It doesn't have to come back into RBR to get that done. Oh, and another fun thing is I am using alkalines in this logger because it's kind of sitting on the shelf. You can see here, it actually tells you how much voltage is inside the battery. So you have an idea of sort of how much power is left. I would caution to do this with lithium batteries because the voltage drop off is very sharp for that. So if you're using alkalines, it's a pretty good indication of how much battery life is left. Okay. So another thing under the instrument tab here is this thing called automatic tasks. So let's talk about this bottom one first. It's actually called auto deploy. It's going to give me a warning. I'll tell you about that later. Essentially, if I set this one up exactly like I just did with twist activation, 32 Hertz sampling, my local time here in Halifax with alkaline batteries, and then I have another 50 CTDs that I'm all configuring exactly the same thing, I can use this feature called auto deploy, where I just disconnect this logger, close it up, take the next logger, open it up, connect it, and I don't have to push any buttons. Ruskin automatically will configure this next instrument exactly the same as the first one. So you just plug it in and you wait for it to configure, unplug, and then you can do all of them like that. In the past, we've actually had like a button to click so you can say like use last settings, but now we have it like this, so it automatically does it. And so if you have many, many instruments, that's a really, really useful feature to add in there. Okay, so that is all that I have for showing you sort of how you can set up an instrument for right now. Are there any other questions before I move into the recovery part? I don't see any. Okay, cool. So I'll just gonna disconnect this and then reconnect it as if I went out in the field and I already deployed it. So everything is the same as that I had just done. And we already talked about that logger offset. You just hover over the clock and it tells you that. Again, we're just trying to be as helpful as possible, but you can see here, there's this flag on my calibration tab. This means I need a calibration on my CTD. The last calibration was at the beginning of 2018, so that's quite a while. I probably should actually get this calibrated. And you can actually request the calibration quote directly in Ruskin. So if I click on this, it's going to send an email to our support team, and then they'll send me an RMA to get my instrument up there to get it calibrated. Also, if I wanted my calibration certificates from January of 2018, I can download them here. So if the instrument is connected, you can get the certificates downloaded directly. And we also ship those in a paper form, but this is a way to have them sort of in a digital form. And now this auto task, because again, let's say, I've recovered 50 of these instruments. If I have auto stop on, this means that if I, let's say, had a bunch of instruments out on a mooring and it said sample every 10 minutes, if I have them back now they're sampling in air, and that's fine. You can cut that data off later, but this way you can, as soon as it attaches into Ruskin, it automatically stops the deployment. And really for me, I think the coolest feature, no, auto deploy is definitely the coolest for me, but the auto download is also really, really useful. So again, when you're done a deployment, if you have auto deploy and auto stop on, as soon as you plug it in, it will download all of the data instead of you having to click this button that says download, and it stops the data collection because you don't want it to be collecting data in the air. So these auto tasks are relatively new. They're probably less than 2 years old, and they're super, super useful if you do have many, many instruments and want to save as much time as possible. Okay, that is all that I have for the recovery piece. So the next part is the data. But if anyone has any questions, again, feel free to put it into the Q&A. I'm just going to close up this logger and get it out of my way. Okay, so I'm going to open up a data set that I have had before. So again, in Ruskin, until you actually close out some of these, this is still the simulated CTD from before and the CTD with the oxygen and the Tridente on it. So here you can kind of click through the different things. So here we have the data, and there's two particular things I wanted to show you. I'm just going to make this bigger so y'all can see Actually, I'm going to show you a couple more things than just the two. I need to move you down. Here we go. Okay. So we have all of the data here all on the bottom. And you can see that we have these purple and these blue bars. So this purple bar is a profile. So I'm sure y'all know this, but a profile is when you take the instrument and it goes down or up depending on where it starts. But for the sake of this, let's assume it's starting at the surface and then it goes down and it comes back up. That's a full profile. So it actually has, Ruskin automatically detects that by looking for changes in pressure, essentially. It also pulls out the upcast and downcast automatically. So in this case, sorry, I should be pointing out that the pink here is the depth. So that's really what I'm looking at here. So as it goes down in the water, this is detecting that this is the actual downcast here. And then the upcast is this really quick piece on the way up. So to me, this looks like they're slowly profiling down because they're really interested in that downward looking data. And then they're pulling it back up just to get it back down in the water. So Ruskin automatically detects these things. And then you can see that there's this like gap in the data in between where, you know, it's not really profiling. It's probably like on the boat or they're moving it some way. So Ruskin does automatic profile detection and then automatic upcast and downcast. And again, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but a lot of folks really, when you're looking at data, you're only looking at it in one direction and you're going to pull out those chunks anyway. So it's nice to have that separated out to start. And then these axes are actually dynamic. So I can scroll in if I click on it, and you can see I can scroll out, oops, the other way. I can move it up and down as well, so that if you are looking at the data, you can see it as clearly as you want. And like this, say for example, the speed of sound, which is this purple line here, is very in a very narrow band. So you can actually like scroll in and make it bigger or smaller to get a better look at the data. So the Ruskin is super useful for checking the data. Like, is this right? There's no major processing going on here. It's giving you the data essentially in the raw format of, here are all the channels from the measured parameters and the derived parameters. I don't have all of it turned on. I can show you all of them. Show all channels, and it gets very messy. You can see it just fills up so much. So often I turn off certain parameters just to get a better look at things, which is really fun to be able to dive into the pieces, especially if you're looking for something particular. And here you can see they have dissolved oxygen, which seemed to be a really important piece for this particular deployment. So, and you can turn things off like this as well to see the data a little bit better. And then you can also do fun things like, let's show only or just show the measured channels, show only certain ones, or you can hide everything and then start from scratch. If you hide all channels, so you can turn certain things on and off. So it's pretty easy to zoom into what you really want to look at and see if things are changing how you expect them to. Like, most people don't really need to see conductivity, so we can remove that one as well. So there is a question, sorry, I kind of zoomed by that piece, about the voltage. So what is the minimum voltage to change the batteries? So when it comes to batteries, our recommendation, sorry, I'm just going to bring this up. Our recommendation is always use fresh batteries. So if you're going out for a deployment, that's going to be a more deployment for 2 years, you want to use fresh batteries of the very best chemistry or the very best type. So if you are using alkalines, make sure you're using the best name brand versions like Duracell or Energizer. And then, so let's say you were going out to do profiling work, right? So this is sort of set up for profiling right now. As you can see, it has 8 Hz sampling for 22 days. Typically, not everybody's going out and sampling constantly every single hour of the day for that amount of time. So if you know you're going out only for 4 hours, then you can kind of cut off 4 hours from this, 22.7 days. And then the next time you go out, if you keep track of that, that's pretty useful that like, oh, we've already used half of these batteries or whatever. There are also rechargeable batteries. That's what this nickel metal hydride one is here. If you want it to be super environmentally conscious and not have to be throwing away batteries all the time. But our recommendation is always like, when in doubt, like the cost of 8 good alkaline batteries versus not getting your data, And I forget, I don't know what the minimum voltage is, but there is a cutoff where the instrument will, like, if the batteries are getting eaten up at the end of a deployment, the batteries will drain and then you won't see any data, and then they kind of recover over time and then you'll see the data. So it kind of cuts in and out at the very end. But I would just say always make sure that you have fresh batteries, and then you shouldn't have to really look at the voltages. Okay, and yeah, so this data, I think that was everything I wanted to show you about. Oh, actually, and then you can actually see, so once I click on this, you can export it in different file formats as well. So this file is called an RSK file, which is what Ruskin makes. When you put an instrument onto Ruskin, it turns all the data into an RSK file, and that's how we're viewing it here in Ruskin. And then you can export it, or you can read it right into MATLAB or Python with our MATLAB and Python scripts. There's once the file is like on your computer, you can do that pretty easy. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Does anyone have any other questions? Thanks for the questions in real time. They've been really useful. I'll give you a few minutes in case something pops up. Actually, I can probably share my screen again so you can see just some of the things. Oh, sure, auto stop. So I can go over all the automatic tasks one more time. So for setup, auto deploy is a great option because it basically means when you set up your first instrument and you have everything configured correctly, so it's easier to look from here. You have everything connected, everything set up, and you have it enabled. Then when you plug in the next one, it'll configure that one. You plug in the next one, it'll configure that one. So it's all the same for the deployment. So it's auto deploy. Auto stop is, let's say you have an instrument that is programmed to sample once a second. So every single second it's taking one data point. When you retrieve it from the water, I'm actually looking at the water here, so that's why I'm thinking of it. Like, you take it out of the water and then you bring it up to the office and then you plug it in. And the whole time it's still actually collecting that data. So it's still using the batteries, and now you're collecting all this data in air, which might be useful, probably not, to have all of that data, so that when you plug it in, it stops the deployment for you. So you don't have to go and actually click the stop button. And then the auto download is as soon as it plugs in, just like when I plugged in my logger earlier, I didn't touch anything and Ruskin recognized that it's an RBR instrument, that the auto download is, again, as soon as it plugs in, it sees that that auto download is on, so it'll download all the data for you. So the auto download and auto stop combination can be really useful because you can plug it in and like walk away without clicking any buttons, because it'll stop the deployment as well as download the data for you without you clicking anything. Great. I hope that answered it. I think it did. Any other questions? Okay, cool. I won't, yes. So Maria's asking if twist activation, that wouldn't be necessary. Exactly. So let's talk about that a little bit. So there are 3 different ways. Like I said, I wasn't going to touch on every detail, but this is super useful. So if you set up an instrument with none as the gating mode, this means I set a start time, say now for me, and then when I configure the instrument, it's going to start right away. So most people who do moored deployments, so instruments that are going to be moored in place, they set it up like this. And some of our instruments don't have twist activation. So our compact logger line, so our small wave loggers, I have one back there, the little yellow ones, those don't have twist activation. So you have to set it up in this gating mode, which is none. You put in a start time and it tells you when essentially the deployment will end. So that's where auto stop would be useful. For twist activation, it's literally you twist the end cap from pause to run. Run means I'm actually collecting data and you put it in the water, and then when it comes back to the surface, you can twist back to pause, and then you're not collecting the data in the air. So Maria's absolutely right there. And then the third option is called the marine wet switch, which is also, you can't put a time in or anything. A start time. The marine wet switch is essentially you put the logger in the water, and as soon as it detects a change in conductivity, so it's a very, very small limit, it's basically sensing salt in the water, then it will start collecting data. So it's kind of similar to twist activation, except that like once the logger comes out of the water, it just automatically stops or starts depending if it's in the water or not. So that's also a super useful feature. But again, you need, in some cases, well, again, today I spoke explicitly about the CTD, but for example, if you had just a pressure sensor, the marine wet switch wouldn't work. So that's why we have the 3 different options. So again, the auto stop works best for when the gating is none, for more deployments, when you're having a bunch of things in the water all at different depths and you just want to stop them and they might be collecting, high frequency data. I think of it really well for wave data, because it's bursting, kind of like I showed you before with the burst. Having all that extra like in-air data is a lot more processing for Ruskin to do when you download it if you have all these extra bursts. Okay. All right. So if you do have any more questions, you can reach us here. You can email us if you did. I said my name, but I didn't actually put it anywhere in the presentation. But my name is Candace. So if you do have any questions, or if you want more information about Ruskin, or if you want to do a training session with your team or more resources, we have many different Ruskin webinars. I think I mentioned before, we do have like a mobile version. I did a whole webinar about that a few years ago, so we can send you any of the links. But again, if you've never used RBR instruments before, or if you've inherited them from somebody, or you think that somebody on your team you might want them to learn how to do it, and they've had no experience before, just reach out and we can always help. Thank you everyone for coming. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We are always happy to help. Bye.